You are a high-ranking official in the Royal Andromedan Court.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay.
On October 31st, the truth.
We have 4 days to save planet Earth.
Will shock you.
I know what you are.
I know you too.
Bugonia, rated R. In select theaters October 24th and everywhere October 31st.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kulturecast. I am your host, Chris Stachiw, and I am joined once again, I wouldn't say as always, but I am joined once again by my dear friend all the way from West Texas. He teaches over there at Texas Tech. He is the, what do you do over there again, Dr. Perlmutter? Enlighten those of us.
Professor of Media and Communication.
So you would say broadly you have nothing to do with aliens. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely, unequivocally, not a single damn thing. On this episode of the Kulturecast, if you have clicked on it, then you know what we are talking about. If you have somehow wandered into this corner of the internet by accident, let me clue you in as to what we're going to be talking about on this episode of the Kulturecast. On this episode of the Kulturecast, we'll be talking about the 2025 Oscar Award nominated film. It did not win any Oscars, but it was nominated for 4, including Best Picture and Best Actress for Emma Stone. She did not win. It did not win, which is a bit of a bummer because we're going to be talking about 2025's Bugonia. So the film is directed by Yorgos Lanthimos on a screenplay by Will Tracy based on Save the Green Planet by Jang Joon-hwan, which is a Korean language film. The film is produced by Yorgos Lanthimos, Emma Stone. Ari Aster is the name that sticks out to me as a fan of Ari Aster's work. And the film stars Emma Stone, Jesse Plemons, Aidan Delbus, Stavros Halkias, and Alicia Silverstone. Yes, that's about the entire cast because this movie has 5 people in it, effectively. And the film is all about Jesse Plemons and Aidan Delbus as a conspiracy theorist and his cousin who abduct Emma Stone's character, who is the CEO of a pharmaceutical company. Read big tech woman, I guess is the way I would look at it. And they kidnap her because they are convinced that she is an alien tasked with destroying humanity. The film will be spoiled, so if you have not seen the film, go ahead and watch it and circle on back. If you have seen it, stick around, though, because I think we're going to have an interesting conversation, because once again, Dr. Perlmutter is asking to talk about this film intentionally. So since you are my guest and you have asked to talk about this movie specifically, Dr. Perlmutter, I will turn the floor over to you. Why Bugonia? Why Bugonia and not Save the Green Planet? Did you just not want to watch a Korean language film? Is that what it is?
Well, I was watching a BTS video last night that had 2 billion hits on YouTube. So, I've watched K-drama and K-historical and K-videos all the time.
He's
so
flexing
I
his
really
K
do
cred,
appreciate
y'all.
Yeah,
He's flexing his K cred.
The C and the T drama, Turkish drama. It really is amazing how many international producers have established a form of dominance in the world of media that you probably couldn't imagine that. When I was growing up, you sort of vaguely heard about Bollywood, and then there'd be like English actors, and a French film would be an art house film. But now we do have this international culture, and I think that's a point, is that, yeah, it is an adaptation of a Korean film. I did not see the Korean film. In fact, I wanted to wait to maybe at some point do a separate analysis of that, because I've heard a lot of people do comparisons. I wanted to focus on Bugonia, and I want to start out by saying that this is a great example that I love to talk about with my students, although I will not assign this movie to my students because I found so many of the situations to be so disturbing, I just wouldn't trust for a general classroom. Maybe a very specialized class where people knew, disturbing films of the 21st century or something. But there was just a lot of stuff here that left me really shocked. And I don't shock easily about the treatment of women, the violence that's in this movie. So it is a movie that really deserves some trigger warnings. And that's okay, because I think we know going into it. I don't think anybody walked into the theater and mixed it up with a new Pixar release or something like that.
I was going to see Hoppers instead, and I just wandered into Bugonia.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to wander into this movie. This movie technically is magnificent. I'm sort of reminded, if anybody's old enough to remember the Zhang Yimou, Chinese director, he made these beautiful dramas in like the 90s and the 2000s, To Live and Joe Do. And I remember Siskel and Ebert, that's how old I am. I remember Siskel and Ebert reviewing those films and talking about how different they were in color. Like the color was so saturated because one of the last factories to do the old style process of processing film was in China, and you could get those reds that just blew you off the screen there. And that's what really struck me at first, is how different in color palette this film is from a lot of what we've seen, where many science fiction movies, many fantasy movies are shades of beige.
Right.
They're dusty, and maybe that's intentional. I mean, Dune has color, but like it's a desert planet, so there's only so much you can do there. But definitely here, just at the very beginning, when we see bees, right, and you think you're in a David Attenborough nature documentary, right, a day in the life of the bees, because they're just rich. And you see them in their detail and you sort of appreciate them. And I think that actually is setting us up for like, wow, how beautiful planet Earth is without us.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a point that's made repeatedly in the film, and we'll go back to it. But that saturation of the beauty of the planet is like an establishing shot for the plot to come. I also like this film because it's a conspiracy theory movie. Now, you could say one of the flaws is that there's no possibility that the conspiracy would not turn out to be true. So you're not wondering whether or not she's an alien, because there are so many signs in the movie that she's not.
Right.
And things could be interpreted different ways. It's very well done. I mean, it's not like from scene one, oh, yeah, you see her pulling a mask over her reptilian face or something like that. You could be guessing until some of the very last scenes, but plot-wise...
My friend I was watching it with did not... I asked her up until the final reveal if she thought that Emma Stone was an alien, and her response up until the end of the movie was no.
Yes. So
I think that's one of the biggest successes of the movie, is the fact that it gets away with, I think, one of the hardest filmic dodges of all, which is convincing you that something is not true, but yet it has been true the entire time.
Yes, absolutely. I felt that in terms of like relation to the audience, everybody would have been disappointed if it had just been Emma Stone had been a CEO who took a workshop on what to say and do if you're kidnapped, to make the kidnappers release you and think that they have a duty to be merciful to you. I think if that had been the end, if like she had just taken the guy back and like hit him over the head, and she's freed and she's talking on Good Morning America the next day about how she was so brilliant in manipulating the kidnappers, it would have been one ending, but I don't think the audience who went to this film would have been happy with that ending. I felt like they had to go alien. It's just a question of how and when. And I want to back up by saying I liked so many elements in this film, but I did not like the reveal system. Like not only what she said, but how she said it and the sort of details. I felt there was a lot of problems there in terms of plot, and we'll get to it. But let's just say that for me, 90% of this film is technically some of the best work I've ever seen.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
If it had won an Oscar, I would have cheered. Certainly Emma Stone has proven that for someone of her generation, she is, if not the lead performer, then one of them, right? You think about the range of her work.
Right. Especially with Yorgos Lanthimos, which I think is the interesting part. I wouldn't say I'm the biggest Emma Stone fan, but I will say in terms of the people that she works with and the roles that she's given, I don't think anyone outside of Yorgos Lanthimos has really been able to give her the role that she excelled at. And Poor Things obviously is what she ended up winning the Oscar for, which is also a Yorgos Lanthimos film. So, I am inclined to agree with you. I'm actually not that big of a fan of Emma Stone, but when she works with Yorgos Lanthimos, all I can think is this is in a lot of ways like modern day Scorsese and De Niro in terms of their ability to work well together, because The Favorite and Poor Things and Bugonia are all pretty great movies. And obviously, two of those three movies have actresses winning awards for Best Actress. Olivia Colman for The Favorite, and then Emma Stone for Poor Things. Like, that's I mean, a pretty good track record working with certain actresses as a director. So I'm more excited to see what they do together than what she does on her own, because for the most part, I'm not really an Emma Stone fan.
Well, to me, she reminds us of a kind of star that existed during the classical Hollywood system. And we have to remind people, say, as early as the 1910s through, say, the 1950s, there was a particular system where you would be identified, like MGM would say, hey, this young actress is really good. And they would sign you to a studio contract.
Right.
Where you would only make movies for that studio, or they would lend you out for a fee to another studio. But you wouldn't just sit at home and wait for your agent to call. They would give you dancing lessons, singing lessons, horse riding lessons, gun shooting lessons. I mean, they would make you available for anything that came along. And you didn't have that much of a choice. I mean, if MGM said, okay, you're going to be in a wrestling picture and then a submarine picture, I'm sort of referring to Barton Fink, which was a sort of insight into the studio system here. But if you're going to be in that kind of a picture, your choice was like, okay, I quit the business, or yes, sir, Mr.
Play ball.
And Mr. Goldwyn, I'm definitely going to do that. And so the actors...
Sam to his friends, David. Sam to his friends.
The actresses and actors that came out of that system were multi-talented. I mean, they really could jump on a horse. They could dance. They could sing. They could do comedy 1 month. I mean, the films didn't take as long to shoot as they do now. Right. So you might be doing a dancing, singing comedy, and then you might be doing a dark film noir, and then you might be doing a war picture. Right. We're all within 6 months. And whatever you think of that system, it had its flaws. It certainly produced people who not only were good actors and actresses, but they were very well-rounded. And Emma Stone, I mean, you have to give it to her. I mean, she's in La La Land, and she's
that's right.
Yeah, letter A, and I'm forgetting remember the title there. And then she's in this, right? And let's talk about her role here. It's an incredibly harrowing, difficult role. I mean, I understand that she wasn't actually really beaten and really electrocuted and really, tortured, but like to have to sit there on a set and credibly pretend that you've been through this trauma, and you make a list there of all the physical things and the psychological things she's gone through.
Right.
I mean, we're spoiling things here. To find a basement full of bodies.
Right.
Just any normal human being, and of course we find out she's not a normal human being, would be traumatized all along the way here. And yet she very convincingly plays somebody who is incredibly smart and savvy and keeps coming back from torture, disaster, beating, everything, and keeps trying to be victorious in manipulating the people who are doing this to her. So like you should, if you're a normal human being, you should feel sorry for this poor woman who's being attacked like this. Then, of course, there's a backstory that you learn where, I mean, you learn right away she's this CEO, very manipulative, not very truthful, not the kind of person in real life that you would necessarily like as a person.
Right.
But you're balancing all this with you're balancing this with the idea, yeah, but this is a human being treated so badly. Should I feel sorry for her or not? Right? Who is she?
Right.
Right? Because we're
she
still
really?
trying to guess that. Yeah. And let's talk about conspiracy theory here, because the two characters, right? It's really the one with the, and I would say it's smart writing to have the stereotypical kind of easily swayable sidekick, or also partner in crime. I think it was very interesting to lean into there's always the one who seems impressionable that can be taken advantage of. I mean, you see it in the big cases anyways, and I like that they kind of lean into that a little. Yes, I think, again, this is a tribute to an actor who has self-identified as somebody with developmental issues and autism and things like that. And I think that it's a great performance. The script role he's given has really a lot of depth and nuance. For example, he's one of the only people who expresses a conscience about what they're doing, about what anybody's doing, right? Like, and he asks good questions. Like it would have been very easy to make him into the dumb sidekick. Well, sure, Joe, whatever you say, Joe, you know. But even when he's saying, I'll go along, and you see you get a sense, you know, there wasn't a long prologue of their background, but you get a sense that like they've been together a long time as cousins. They've been through some very tough years. They've looked out for each other. He certainly sees the lead conspirator as like one of the only people in his life who cares about him. But yet he still keeps asking, like, is this right? Oh, wait a minute, hold on. You know,
it's not blind fealty to Jesse Plemons.
Yeah. I mean, he's asking questions that a skeptic might answer about, like, are you sure it's Andromedans? And I want to talk about the pronunciation of Andromeda. But I just felt that this was so well done that the co-conspirator was not just a slavish acolyte, right? Just taking orders and doing. He wasn't in the Nazi sense that just the guy who just follows orders and just does the henchman or something, which very, very important that I think makes it part of the drama there. And of course, Emma Stone, who again, like your friend, we could just read this and like she is a smart CEO. You know, she's physically trained. She's probably in better shape than both of them and could, under normal circumstances, take out both of them. Almost does, right? In the kidnapping scene, right? She almost wins there. And certainly she's presented as smarter than both of them, more manipulative. And so you've got this troika there of very interesting characters who are not necessarily checking all the boxes of stereotype. Just going back to Jesse's character, I'm fascinated as somebody who studies conspiracy theories that I've talked about how we're in the era of the low effort conspiracy theory.
Right.
Like in the past, say in the 60s or 70s, if you had a conspiracy theory, like John F. Kennedy's assassination was a group project and there was the Cubans and whatever were behind it and so on.
Right.
You would have to do things like you have to go to a library and find books, right? You would have to get a copy of the Warren Commission report. You would have to go interview people. There was a lot of effort into producing anything recognizable as a conspiracy theory document. Now we live in an era where, honestly, people just post some AI picture on the internet and a million people go, yeah, I knew it was UFOs. I knew it was Bigfoot.
We lovingly refer to that as AI slop.
Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of people are agreeing with it or liking it, or I'm not 100% sure.
Term I would use.
Yeah. Well, as we've talked about before, the theory that I present to students is that believing is seen. So if we believe something, then we're more likely to accept visual evidence of it than to be critical and sort of say, is this picture really correct? But the point is that Jesse is a sort of old-fashioned conspiracy theorist. Like he's done this I guess for years, maybe part of his whole life. His mother was a conspiracy theorist. So like it's been in the family. He inherited it from his dying mother. So he put all this effort into it. If he put all that effort into, I don't know, starting a business, maybe he would have done a little bit better. But you see the parallel between her, who's put all this effort into achieving wealth and power and fame as a CEO, and him, who's put all this effort into something microscopic that sounds insane. Because that's another great choice here by the filmmakers, is that they didn't pick a conspiracy theory which in any way sounds plausible.
Right.
They didn't pick an easy one. They didn't say like, okay, I want you to admit that this company, accidentally poisoned, right? And then it would have been a completely different movie.
Well, it's not even a conspiracy. It's not even a conspiracy. Yeah. That's a fact. Yeah. Which is not as fun, I think, that obviously becomes in conspiracy theory land. That always becomes the thing, like you said, that it always seems like it seemed like for a long time when we talked about conspiracy theories, we didn't have the inherent stretching of even base reality beyond its breaking point. But now with conspiracy theories, it seems like the breaking point that base reality has been taken beyond is as just they just blew past it, like flat Earth, or what Jesse Plemons believes in this movie. I mean, that's no different than flat Earth. Like, you are under the impression that this woman is an alien, and there is no information that you have. I would say that he has less proof that she's an alien than people with flat Earth, theories have. Like, as flat Earth is inherently incorrect, but like this guy has no evidence that she's an alien, none tangible.
Right. Of course, in this movie, I'm not sure whether it is saying the Earth is flat. I mean, because of the ending.
I think it might be. I don't know.
There is a claim there. Yeah. So that's a really key point, is that all of these people are smart in their own way. They're contributory, like they have information that's important. And this could have been a play. I mean, there's no question that they could have just changed some scenes, and this could have been an off-Broadway drama, right?
Oh, yeah.
The Los Angeles Street Theater drama. It really comes down to these three characters. Everybody else is just... And the fourth character who's introduced, and I had some questions there about the police officer. So we're talking about the 90% of the film I appreciate, and we'll talk about the 10% where I was just really frustrated by the decision-making. But there's no question that for 2026, this is a marvelously constructed film. That, like, the dumbness of so much content today, where you wonder whether any thinking person was associated with the writing.
Yeah,
that's not true here. Obviously, really smart people put this together, and really smart people were on the screen working with it.
Well, I was gonna say Will Tracy, who is the screenwriter on the film, obviously, like we mentioned at the top, he's adapting the Save the Green Planet Zhang Junhuan film. That film has a male character in the Emma Stone role, which changes... I think that changes the optics of it, and honestly makes it more interesting, because it becomes a woman in peril movie that it actually is not a woman in peril movie in reality. It just seems like a woman in peril movie on the face of it, at least in what Western audiences would perceive as a woman in peril movie. But it is actually a men in peril movie. They just don't realize it, which is not something you realize until the second time you watch the movie, because the first time you watch the movie without knowing how it's going to play out, it seems like a woman in peril movie, because it's a woman kidnapped by two conspiracy theorists who are bigger than her. I love the juxtaposition of how much bigger than her they are almost all the time. They always look bigger than her. And then you realize, like, about halfway through the movie, 2/3 the way through the movie, it's the old quote from Watchmen, you're not locked in here with me, or not, I'm not locked in here with you, you're locked in here with me. Like, that's what they don't realize about 2/3 of the way through, is that she is in fact an alien, and she is going to make sure that neither one of these guys make it. I wouldn't say make it out alive, but I mean, don't get what's coming to them, because they all get what's coming to them. And Aiden Delbus's character is probably the only one that you kind of, okay, well, this is the questionable one, but everybody else seems pretty downright awful in this movie. Jesse Plemons, Stavros Halkias, and Alicia Silverstone are not good people. I think that's made like abundantly clear. And then with Jesse Plemons, like, I think they hammered that point home with having, her find all these like disembodied heads and disemboweled bodies in his basement, which means he's been doing this, and maybe he got lucky this time. I mean, he does say he found 2 others, but again, I don't know if he's worth believing or not. I like the idea of adapting a Korean film and changing the gender and it working on more levels because of that choice you're making than otherwise. Because like you said, it seems like a smart decision to make. A lot of the decisions that were made in the creation of this movie seem like smart decisions that were made. And, Will Tracy worked on The Menu, which I don't know if you saw. I think it has its moments. He wrote Bugonia, and then he was a producer on Eddington, which I'm kind of probably not as I'm not as high on as other Ari Aster stuff, but he's the former editor of The Onion, and he used to work at Last Week Tonight, and he worked on Succession as well. So he has a track record, and I think that, to your point, speaks volumes to the adaptation of a Korean script, not only feeling like a completely different movie, but also feels like something more in other ways. Like it feels like it has maybe more to say than the original Korean film.
Yes, and if I were going to show this to a class, which I will not, I would assign as supplementary viewing a couple of films and TV series, including ones that you just mentioned. We live in an era where if you were in Hollywood and you were going to make a film and you pitched the film and you said, and the hero of the film is the CEO of a chemical company, you would have a lot of people going like, okay, how are we going to make him sympathetic in any way? Like the audience just walking in the door.
Right.
Is CEOs have not gotten a lot of great press lately. I found it interesting that there's a new TV series which I've not seen called The Studio, and just from the advertising, I think it's an Apple show. They have a guy who takes over as head of a studio, and there's a little catch line. I just wanted to make great movies, and now I'm finding I'm part of the problem as head of the studio. So maybe he's going to be a more sympathetic character there. But okay, so Succession, an entire brilliantly written TV show where, except for the non-player characters, like the ordinary people who are treated literally like bleep, everybody in the show is horrible. These are terrible people fighting over something. And yet I watched with fascination. It's a very, very successful show with the younger people, like my students and so.
Right.
Yeah. And I think part of it is, the idea of like, what would you do if you were born into a billionaire family? And that it's very Shakespeare and Greek tragedy, and that you literally have a Royal family where there's fighting inside and for the father's love and to succeed the father and all that stuff. So there's just a lot of interesting stuff going on there. But the reason I'm mentioning it, and then I'll have two quick other readings. One is Akira Kurosawa's High and Low, which I think was a strong influence. I haven't seen the Korean film, but I have to think it was a strong influence on the Korean film and Bugonia. For those of you who haven't seen it, High and Low, Akira Kurosawa had an astonishing range of work. He didn't just do samurai movies. High and Low was an urban noir drama that I'm blanking now. Mel Gibson remade into the movie Ransom, as I recall, with a lot of changes. But anyway, in there's the CEO of a shoe company, played by Toshiro Mifune, and there's a kidnapping. But it was intended to be a kidnapping of his son, but it turns out they kidnapped his chauffeur's son. They're playing together, and they just look alike. So the tension is trying to get back his chauffeur's son. And what's interesting in there is that there is this reference to the police who are doing the investigation. They're not necessarily like, oh yeah, we love CEOs, we love rich people. But because Toshiro Mifune consistently shows himself to be a good man who really cares, who really is willing to sacrifice everything, including all of his fortune, to get his chauffeur's son back, you begin to sort of cheer for him as a protagonist there. So the reason I'm referring to these, and then the last one I'll bring up, is Rod Serling, creator of The Twilight Zone, wrote an incredible teleplay that was made into a television movie with a terrible title called Patterns. And it was Succession 1958. It was about a power play fight for control of a company in New York. And so you're getting a view in corporate life in the 50s when it was, a CEO was seen more positively than today. And one character is a sort of good person who's trying to make the system work good. My point for all this tangent is that Emma Stone does something pretty incredible, which is that she has all the elements of a very nefarious person, almost an evil person.
Right.
But again, because of what's done to her, and because you think this part of the identification in this movie is you think, well, what would I do in this situation, right? And she is doing, and as you know, Chris, I wrote a book, Policing the Media. I'm not plugging it. I'm just saying I wrote a book on police and the media, and this is back in the 90s. And one of the pieces of advice police have is that when you're in that kind of a situation and, you're unarmed, and you just pointed it out, while we are specifically shown that she is very physically capable, right? She's taking like Taekwondo with a trainer in a particular early scene before she's kidnapped. And we know just Emma Stone is a fit person. We do know that they are bigger than her and tougher than her and just bulk, right? We do know that she's tied up, right? And she's,
right.
she's got all the disadvantages. And so her manipulation, which is normally a negative thing, like, oh, this corporate CEO is manipulating the public, suddenly becomes a positive. And you can sort of sympathize and understand, like, okay, I understand why she's trying to be manipulative, because she's trying to live.
Right. Well, and that's what allows you to have this kind of level of, I would say, unease with her character, because there's a scene, and I'm assuming, just based on the way you've talked about the film, the scene, I would say, that becomes what on the second watch through is the exposition dump of the movie, which is how do we have her actually be an alien? Well, here's how she's actually an alien, which the first time you watch the movie, it would seem like, well, this just is her making this up on the spot to get out of, to essentially like lean into his crazy. However, on the second watch, that is so far from what is going on, because in the second watch, you realize this is more or less the truth.
Yeah,
I don't know how I feel about it, because I'm not sure how well executed it is my issue. And I'm curious your thoughts, because it seems like you have maybe some issues with it as well. Possible.
Okay, here's where, like, if I were in the studio team, I would give some notes. Either the characters are lying to us, especially her character is lying to the humans and making just stuff up, as you say, off the top of her head, out of her butt, or there's something seriously wrong with the plot as we're presented. And let me just give a couple of examples of where I just did not understand the choice and what it was supposed to mean. And maybe I'm dumb and I didn't get it, but I have no problem, by the way, telling my students or anybody, like, I didn't get that. I didn't understand what happened there, what and why and what it meant. And people, I've talked to other people about this and they've given me explanations. I still don't get it. So let me just start out with something very simple and small that, I guess because I'm a journalism professor, really bothered me. There is a point where the Jesse character mispronounces a word. He mispronounces a word. And she jumps on that and says, well, I guess, you don't know grammar. Basically, I'm rewriting the line.
Right.
Yeah. And it bothered me because her backstory, now maybe that was supposed to be a sign she's not human, because her backstory is you don't get to be CEO of a company unless you grew up and had a very good education, especially in communications. Right? Especially and she is a top-notch. I mean, you think of all the verbal plays that she makes with her staff about, like, people don't need to stay past 5 unless you really have to, unless there's a really important project. I mean, that whole CEO speak, corporate speak. In other words, she is good at corporate speak.
Right.
She would know that mispronunciation is not a grammar error. Now, that was a small thing. But again, you know movies better than I do, but I'm assuming screenplays are read by lots of people. Actors read them, the studio reads them, the screenwriters read. I mean, this screenplay was read hundreds of times before it was shot. This was not like a high school production where they just wrote as they went along, or apparently Wheel of Time where they're writing it as they're going along. But I mean, a lot of people looked at this before it went to screen. So I thought to myself, why did they make that simple mistake? Because sometimes you don't know, is the character making a mistake and that means something? Or did the filmmakers make a mistake there? And it's a small thing, but it led to a much larger one, is that when she starts describing, I mean, her big reveal, her plot dump there of the Andromedans and 75 million years ago and their experiments with humans, it's absurd. It's completely absurd. Like that means every biologist on planet Earth, every piece of fossil evidence, everything we have for science about the history of the Earth is 100% wrong.
Right.
And again, I'm thinking, like, did they just throw that in there and not think about it? Or like no one associated with the film had ever taken an evolutionary biology class? It's sort of like the opening of Prometheus, where I'm going, really? You're going to claim that humans were formed by, the engineers dumping their genetics into the water? I mean, just okay. If it had been like Prometheus, where they just have something inexplicably dumb and just move on with it, and I didn't necessarily think Prometheus was a terrific film plot-wise, but here, this is like the big moment, right?
Right.
Where we're finding out, you're right all along, conspiracy theorists, crazy conspiracy theorists, you're right all along, and here's the explanation. The 75 million years ago, like, we have we have a long evolutionary record, right? Like we've found bones. So what? The Andromedans have been planting the evolutionary record of humankind. They've been planting like fake bones. It's just so wrong. You can go online. I actually haven't looked, but I would have to think if you like brought a biologist onto the show, they would say, yeah, that's not the way evolution works. That's not the way the fossil record tells us. So, okay. So what are our choices there? I actually wrote them down like a professor. I wrote this down. Okay. So choice number one is that hundreds of people involved in making this film have no scientific knowledge whatsoever and no like knowledge of like human speech whatsoever. I just can't believe that. Right. So then I think, okay, so it had to have been a deliberate choice. So it could be, it's possible, which you see in science fiction films all the time. They just didn't care. Somebody said, insert science stuff here.
Right.
And just moved on. But we've just made this case that this is one of the great filmmakers of our time with really thoughtful precision and ideas and writing, right? This is not this is not a Mystery Science Theater 3000 candidate for, Wizards of the Lost Kingdom or something like that. Or I love Mystery Science Theater 3000. They have some films there where the science really wasn't thought through. So I don't believe that either. I don't believe that they didn't care. So choice 3, and there's probably others as well, but choice 3 is the Andromedans. It bothered me that she pronounced it that way. The Andromedans are completely wrong about their own history and their own science, about how their relationship to humans.
Okay.
And I was thinking, okay, if that's true, now again, like we'll just think about. I was thinking about this. King Charles III of England. He's King of England, right? He's coming to the United States. He is a pretty smart guy, extremely well read. He's read Shakespeare and written commentaries on architecture and things like that. He's a very intelligent guy. But if like somebody put him on the spot and had him explain evolutionary theory, maybe he'd get some things wrong, right?
Right.
So just because you're the empress of the Andromedans, and I have a question about that too, was she the empress or whatever? But anyway, doesn't mean that you know science. Just because you're a member of a species, it's not pluribus where you know what every other person in the whole species knows, right? So I am a scientist in one narrow area of human knowledge. I don't necessarily speak for my friends who are chemists or evolutionary biologists. I didn't get that. I didn't get that, especially, and again, maybe this is a choice, especially since she's saying one of the reasons that they are thinking about destroying humanity and killing humans, we'll talk about that a little bit in a moment, is because we're anti-science. We're ignoring the science. And then when she talks about science, it's ludicrous science. So I need somebody to explain that choice to me.
Well, I feel like and this is again my perception of things anyways. The reason everything kind of doesn't hang together intentionally is I think, and this is again my takeaway. I think it's maybe just to further reinforce that even within these disparate lines of thinking about these bigger events and trying to quantify it in a way that maybe other people don't, i.e. a conspiracy theory or something to that effect, even there they have facts that don't line up with one another within those groups. And, like you said, I mean, I perceive that Emma Stone is the empress, whatever you want to call it, of this civilization. And she theoretically should know. And, we're also taking the movie at face value that it is telling the truth in those scenes, that, what the movie is saying to us in that moment is, in fact, the way things happen. But maybe that's not even the case. Maybe that's, maybe it's a double dodge and she's actually, lying about that too. That could be, that could be the other way of interpreting it. Now, that would be an even headier direction to go. And I think that might be, I don't know. I'm not sure they went that far. I will say, in terms of the pace of the movie, the scene where all of a sudden we have her expositioning for 5 minutes straight is, it kind of grinds the pace of the movie to a bit of a halt from a stylistic position. But in terms of what she is saying content-wise, I think it's interesting that there isn't really one. I don't know. It's not that there's not one direction to go, but when you start adding things together, they do not equal zero.
Well, you're bringing up something really important here, and you're partly answering my question, and I appreciate it. because this is why I talk to other people and not just wander around and alone.
Not the
with
echo chamber
my
of
conspiracy
academia.
theories. Yeah, yeah. Could it be that she knows what she's spouting about the origins of humans and the science is actually intended, like she knows it is just dumb, crazy stuff?
Right. Bold-faced lies.
This is a final test of humans, that the humans on the screen fail and the humans in the audience fail. Because I tell you what, as you know, there is actual research, and that research has guided the decisions of studios in the question of why do so many film trailers and teasers give away so much of plots, even in mysteries where there's reveals, right?
Right.
Why is that so? Well, because there has been actual research in psychology and my field that audiences, a majority of audiences, not all of audiences, but maybe 65% of audiences, especially for big budget films, mass films, do not like to feel stupid. That's a problem when there's going to be a reveal. That's why they want to make sure that the reveal is in less intellectual films, less art house films. They want to make sure that the reveal is telegraphed. And then they will even do it in the teaser.
Right.
So that's what the research shows, and that drives studio decision making. That's why people say, well, how come they reveal the plot? Because audiences don't want to feel dumb. They don't want to feel like, oh man, I couldn't see that. I couldn't figure out who the murderer was. They want to make sure that the reveal is foreshadowed and there's like a big red flag, like, oh, pay attention to this here, there. Now, great reveal films don't do that. Okay. So you've given me a new theory, which is that the Empress of Andromeda is going, humans, this is your last chance. If you call out my bullshit here, if you say, wait a minute, that's the stupidest story I've ever heard. That makes no sense whatsoever. That can't be true. It's evolutionary biology and millions of pieces of evidence show that you're wrong. She would have said, oh, okay. All right, humans.
You passed.
Yeah, you passed. And there have been some plots like that. There was a great little episode of Babylon 5. I'm going to give away a secret reveal here. In Babylon 5, it didn't have to do with the arc of the entire fantastic main plot, but just this alien probe shows up and starts asking tough questions of the crew of Babylon 5, like math questions and just like a final exam for a STEM field type questions.
Right.
And the Captain Sheridan, becomes suspicious. Basically, the probe, I forgot whether it actually says, like, if you don't give me the right answers, I'm going to kill all of you, right?
Sure.
And the Captain Sheridan becomes a little suspicious. And his crew is all working to find, like, what is this incredibly difficult calculus problem and things like that. And finally, he decides, give them the wrong answer to every question. And it turns out the probe says, thank you, goodbye, Well, this was a civilization that didn't want any competition. So they sent these probes out, and if you gave the right answers, that means you're advanced scientifically, and we're going to have to kill you. So you won't be competing with us. Well, that was pretty clever, right? Okay, I'm sorry if I gave that. If people have watched that. But the point is that you have a new theory here, Chris, that you've developed, which I think makes some sense, because then we go to the flat Earth.
The literal flat Earth reveal in the movie.
Yeah. And okay, Chris, you've answered all my questions. What is that supposed to be? Some sort of topographic, like a Mercator projection, or like, is this a reveal that, wow, flat Earth was right all along?
That's what I don't know, because, part of it thinks that it's just, a view of the Earth from a specific point of view. But part of me is also like the way that the film positions it is just a flat disc, the way people have talked about with flat Earth. And so that's,
it's mocking humans.
Right.
It's saying, you humans are so dumb. This is what we represent of you, because we think you're dumb. There's some other pieces of evidence there too, right? Because, like, for example, she's the Empress. Empresses tend to have like a security detail. If the Empress went missing, people would sort of know that. I mean, there's a lot of holes, right? Like, for example, she drives a Mercedes, very, very high-end Mercedes. And I couldn't believe that they took the Mercedes when they kidnapped her. The FBI would have followed that. They follow cell phones. They follow things. There were a lot of holes in the plot, which now you've suggested to me. It's all mocking the stupidity of humanity. All these holes are not holes. They're just saying, you humans, you're so dumb, we can get away with. Although Jesse, the character, killed a bunch of Andromedans, which again to me is a plot question. Like, didn't Emma Stone as Empress notice that some of her people have been missing for months or years?
Well, did he actually kill them?
How many? Well, she asks him. Again,
she goes, how many did you kill? And he goes, 2.
Right. Now,
are we meant to believe that he
know?
actually killed Andromedans, or is he just saying that, believing that he has?
He believes that he has, but does she believe that he has?
Or does she, did he actually kill them is the question. That's the thing about the movie that's never determined is how much of what Jesse Plemons is saying is real. Because we realize by the end of the movie that what Emma Stone has been saying is possibly all true, if you take it at face value. But how much of what Jesse Plemons has said is real as well is the interesting part. To answer your question, on that map where Emma Stone is using a spike to kind of kill humanity, it is ringed by white, like a white ice wall, like the flat earthers believe rings the flat earth. So I don't know. I wouldn't say it's Kubrickian, but in a certain sense, like Kubrick has been laid claim that Kubrick did not do anything unintentional. I do not know how much of that is real. I do not know how much of that is people just wanting to see things where there are not things. But if you go by Yorgos Lanthimos is doing everything intentionally, then to me, it being a circular disc on a table that's supposed to represent our Earth, it might be flat Earth, yeah.
Yeah, and so we're left with this question about whether the director did something which you are definitely forbidden from doing in Hollywood, and that's mocking the audience.
Right.
And questioning the intelligence of the audience, including you and I. And I'm fine with that personally. Like if somebody can trick me, like, whoa, that's great. I appreciate the movie or the television series or the digital game better. And I don't mean trick me as in jump scare of like, oh gosh, there's a monster in the closet. But like, I thought a plot or some dialogue meant one thing, but now thinking back about it, maybe it meant something else. I don't think we have an answer. And I hate it when people give an answer ex post facto. The answer has to be in the film or it's not. So it's meant to be a question mark. I want the director giving an interview in New Zealand or something and saying, oh yeah, I was openly mocking the audience. Anybody who believed that speech of hers is an idiot, which I wouldn't advise him to do. But
well, that's what David Lynch always stopped himself from doing, which is why I always respected David Lynch so much, which is David Lynch never took it upon himself to answer questions as to the meaning of his movies, because the moment, and it's Salinger-esque, right? I mean, that's why Salinger didn't want his book, Catcher in the Rye adapted. He didn't want Catcher in the Rye adapted because once the book is adapted, it's kind of hard to unsee the actor who has been cast as the main character. It's hard to see them as any other thing. It's hard to see them as the character you've conjured in your mind versus the character that someone else adapted or conjured from that character in their own mind. And that is the thing about, that's the thing about this movie. Like, and again, like you said, like with David Lynch and other people, like David Lynch makes sure that there is room for audience interpretation, which is not a guarantee anymore. Audiences in a lot of ways don't even want that. The audiences, like you said, they want to feel smart, and feeling smart sometimes means removing complexity or ambiguity from something entirely, which is a shame, in my mind anyways.
You brought up Eddington, and I love to see the online discussion about movies, and I find interesting that a lot of what you're saying and we're talking about is missing from the online discussion. But Eddington is a great example. I saw so many comments of people who were angry at that movie for not taking a clear stand, right? Or what they felt was a clear stand.
Right.
About certain political issues and political parties and so on. And again, it's everybody has to decide what kind of film appreciator, television consumer they are, your social media. I'm not going to ever say that you saying, hey, I want to go watch Project Hail Mary and I want to just have a fun time on a roller coaster ride with interesting visuals and a great adventure. That is terrific. Good for you. But if somebody wants to make a completely different kind of film, I'm wondering, should you get mad at them for making that different kind of film?
I don't think so. But I'm also of the mindset that the things that I want to watch are challenging me beyond the reasonable expectation of what challenge most audiences are looking to get out of their film. I think a lot of people are expecting to go into a movie and not have the film challenge them in any substantive way. And I think that's unfortunate. And like you said, with the movie trailers being the way that they are, I think that's indicative of a society that is not necessarily interested in going along with the director or trusting the director in the ride that they're taking them on. They want to know ahead of time, like you said, they want to be smarter than the filmmaker. And you don't have to be smarter than the filmmaker to enjoy a movie. You can go along the ride with the filmmaker and they can take you through those moments with them, as opposed to you having to see it ahead of time and enjoy it, retroactively is what it feels like, as opposed to in the moment. I like that there are directors still that work within the medium that actually feel like they're pushing mainstream audiences in a way that when we talk about like Christopher Nolan, like I always think Christopher Nolan is not as clever as he used to be. I mean, I think Chris Nolan, frankly, in a lot of ways has just kind of given up the ghost on trying to make interesting movies, and he's just making big, broad movies with big, broad strokes. And that's about it, which is fine if that's the kind of movie you want to make. But it's not the kind of movie I resonate with, because as a film watcher, I would like to see a movie that's actually engaged in challenging me as a viewer, not pretending to challenge me, but doing the barest of bare minimum to get to that point.
Yes, and I think part of the problem is when audiences collide. That is a film that would have had one kind of audience with one kind of expectation finds itself in front of a different audience. And we've all been there. You're going, this is a great show, but I'm not the audience for this show, right? And I'm very lucky in my life, and I think I've mentioned him before, but I was a student as an undergraduate student, and then I got to be a teaching assistant for the great film scholar Amos Vogel. Very interesting guy. He was a refugee from Nazi Austria. He founded Cinema 16 in New York, and then he became a film professor at University of Pennsylvania. And he wrote a book, which I still think is like a must-read classic, called Film as a Subversive Art. And he wanted to give attention to thousands of small films, experimental films that never, with a few exceptions. I mean, he talked about Woody Allen, but he talked about people who were breaking rules of cinema or doing things differently or experimenting. And we watched some of those movies. And I have to say, some of those movies were unwatchable. But in the context of like, here's an experimental film where they tried this and they spent $300, right? And they tried this new technique. And I don't think it worked, but I appreciate like the director and the actors trying this and doing something different and interesting, right? I would have been angry, as I am, if they'd spent $300 million to achieve a complete failure. So that's where I think there's pushback against the megalopolises and The Bride and things like that, where honestly, they should have spent $1 million to make an experimental small film, right, an art house audience, but they spent the medical healthcare budget of a small African country on, I think, an irresponsible, self-indulgent type of film. And that's not the case here. We want to say that's not the case here. You will be entertained. I mean, obviously, if you're triggered by certain types of violence and so on, please don't watch this movie. But like, if you're willing to put up with the horror of this movie, it's from the very beginning to the very end. This is an incredibly entertaining movie and successful.
Well, and I also think, like you said, it has a couple interesting kind of positions it comes at things from. I think the other interesting idea and position it comes at things from is, like we've said, there's a reveal at the end of this movie that Emma Stone is clearly an alien. And then there's the other reveal that the aliens are actually trying to help humanity and they're doing everything they can. And humanity is just kind of being the way humanity is and refusing to play ball in a substantive way. And I love the reveal at the end of the movie that it would seem that the Earth is better off without us. And that the aliens' entire goal by the end of the movie is, well, in the original film, they destroy Earth. In this remake or readaptation, they just remove humanity, which I find to be such an interesting and important distinction to make. Because by allowing Earth to exist, this movie is saying, well, Earth in and of itself is saving, maybe humanity not so much. In the original movie, it's, baby out with the bathwater. And I think it's very interesting because this movie, I think, is a tad more hopeful in that way, which is odd because on so many, faces of it with this movie, this is not a hopeful movie. This is a very cynical and nihilistic.
Yes. I do overthink everything. And so the Chernobyl ending where like there's this place where there's no humans, but the wildlife just, there's a final shot there of the bees, right?
Right. The bees are
going to be okay. Back. I have to say, and everybody should probably stop listening to the podcast at this point because I'm going to reveal something which it shouldn't be a reveal. But like the problem with all the humans, I first of all, maybe you and I agree that it is a problem for all humans to die. I mean, like we're not that bloodthirsty. So it's like that is a problem. Although within the story, the diegetic, within the storyline, okay, you see why they would do that, at least according to their own rationale. But Chris, you and I are animal lovers.
That's right.
And the problem is that those bees and those cows and those cats and those hamsters, they're sort of dependent on it.
Right.
Now, I guess it would have been sort of ridiculous and then the Andromedans land and free every hamster and train it to live in the wild. And every cat is taken in by an Andromedan to be a pet. It's a pretty hard, obviously wiping out all human life is a horrible ending, but like a lot of animals would go too.
Right. Yeah. Domestic cats that can't leave the unintentional cages that they're locked in, AKA their homes or apartments or other things. Yeah, it's a weird ending because the ending is supposed to be like, I think my perception of the ending is it's meant to be somewhat of an uplifting ending, but by every approximation, like you said, humanity being wiped off the face of the earth is pretty stark. The fact that, if you actually sit and think about what the ending is proposing for more than 5 minutes, it doesn't seem as kind of uplifting and maybe hopeful as it seems. Like the Andromedans are not any better than humanity. They just have an easier means with which to make decisions because their technology allows them to do so.
I think that's a very incisive way of putting it. In The Day the Earth Stood Still, the alien is definitely portrayed within the movie space as like they're superior to us.
Right.
Their morality, no war, no atomic weapons, peace on Earth. They're supposed to be morally and ethically superior to us. And that's why they're threatening us because like you have to get with the program of evolving your ethics to the point we have. Right. Now, maybe somebody could write some other interpretation, like, well, they're imposing their will on us and they're sort of conquering us, but maybe in a more benevolent way. Whatever. The point being, yeah, the Andromedans seem to be deeply flawed. And again, if we go back with the Chris theory, they're also mocking us as they're planning to kill us. Their whole reason for killing us would be wrong if there's one interpretation of the way that they see science, but their interpretation, if the interpretation is the other way, which is what they're just testing us, and we, the audience, failed to test, then yeah, I guess the Andromedans were right after all.
Well, and that's the other thing. We see Jesse Plemons' character poisoning his own mother with antifreeze, and that's because Emma Stone, her thinking was, if I tell a crazy man to go to the hospital, someone will see him. Someone will stop him. Someone will surely stop you from poisoning your mother with antifreeze. And it turns out that no, in fact, Jesse Plemons is able to get all the way there, poison her, and then run away, which is only then when they seemingly catch him. And what's interesting is, Emma Stone is complicit in the murder of Jesse Plemons' mother up until that point anyways, because she has created a product that is, that has caused his mother to go comatose. And so what's interesting is Emma Stone is contributing directly to the death of humans long before she destroys humanity. And in trying to save humanity, she's killing more of us than she's saving, really. How many people has she really saved in this movie? None. Which it seems like their goal, by their own kind of admittance, their goal is to save humanity, but they realize, like you said, with The Day the Earth Stood Still, humanity, it's the opposite of that. Humanity does not get to that point. We're beyond saving.
Yeah, I think, you could take away from this film that the moral of the story, kids, is humanity is beyond saving.
Right.
That's certainly one way to view it. I guess that this is where I know we need to wrap up, but like I did find the other puzzling thing, which you're going to solve for me, Master Chris of all knowledge of all film of all time, is Okay, so there seems to be an issue at the very beginning where you've got this conspiracy theorist, and he believes he's found evidence that there's these Andromedans, and they're manipulating human events, and they're secretly controlling the planet, and they're doing all of these evil things. And yet his demand is, I get to go on the ship and meet the Emperor of the Andromedans and negotiate on behalf of Earth. And I'm thinking, like, wait a minute, if the Andromedans are evil, what's your plan for that? Like, how are you planning to? What's your bargaining chip?
Right. Well, and that's right. Like, what I don't. You know what they say? I think with some conspiracy theorists, they don't think that far ahead. They don't think that far ahead as to what would happen. What would it mean if aliens were real? I think some conspiracy theorists only think about how can we expose the lie that aliens have been covered up, but nobody really thinks about what happens when, and I guess Steven Spielberg will answer this question in the upcoming Disclosure Day film. But no one seemingly is interested in asking the question as to what happens when it's revealed that aliens are in fact real. That's much more interesting than what's been the cover up this whole time. I think the ramifications for humanity are much more interesting in terms of what does it mean for aliens to be real than what does it mean that we covered it up. I don't care. If it's revealed that aliens are real, I don't care that they covered it up. I don't care what reason they had to cover it up. Because the fact that aliens are real is such a much more important and I think reality bending situation that it's. I don't know what Jesse Plemons was attempting to do. I don't think he thought that far ahead. I think that's the point. I mean, again, the short-sightedness of humanity. Like, he just wanted to expose the conspiracy. He didn't really think it through as to what would happen if he was on an alien ship, if they would just tear him apart and, toodaloo, that's it.
Professor Chris, you've educated me. I believe everything you're saying, and you went beyond the exam, kids.
What do you think? I mean, I don't. That's my read. I mean, it's I think it's a comment again on conspiracy theorists and their inability to really understand that if you reveal what you are saying is true to be true, have you thought about what the ramifications of that truly are? Or are you only concerning yourself with revealing what you perceive to be hidden to be true, and what does that mean? They don't think about what that actually means.
Well, you've just stated it very well, is that my understanding from reading a lot of conspiracy theory and conspiracy theorists is that they believe the reveal is the goal, right, and that they will be the revealer and acknowledged by the rest of humanity as, like, Joe Steffens of Muncie, Indiana was the hero of planet Earth, revealing the alien conspiracy, ... to be filled out later. And again, it's not like I've read every conspiracy theorist or have the stamina to do so, but like, I do think there's a ... There's an ellipsis of like, okay, you've revealed the conspiracy, what's going to happen? But here he goes beyond that, and he says he's going to go on the ship and negotiate. So he actually is doing something somewhat like even more ambitious than the average conspiracy theorist, or hopes to.
And yet in the end, he ends up just being a exploding head flying out of a closet, whacking Emma Stone in the forehead.
Which I think was a terrific physical comedy.
I would say, what a gag,
physical horror moment. Yeah.
The movie is rather funny. It does have its kind of humorous moments. The moment where his cousin kills himself, as kind of horrific as it is, Emma Stone's reaction is very funny. With her kind of just covered, face to toe in blood, and her just like, Jesus Christ. Like, she is so expressive. Her face is so expressive that the movie, I think, is rather, like you said, it's rather funny. But I also think it's rather nihilistic. And I think Yorgos Lanthimos has kind of revealed himself to be maybe a bit of a nihilist with his films, which is okay. I mean, I like a point of view. I like a distinct point of view. I like someone who has something to say, and often someone who has something to say doesn't necessarily believe in the positive traits of humanity. It's very hard sometimes to see those because there are very few and far between. And so it's not surprising that the end of this movie is, well, it turns out the conspiracy theorists were right. However, to what end and at what cost were they right? And the cost that they were right was humanity has now been doomed by their inability to just play ball, or like you said, not be stupid. So I enjoyed this movie immensely. I had a great time with it. I can understand now and see why the people that I trust opinion-wise were very high on this movie because it is a dark movie. It is not necessarily the most upbeat, positive film I've ever seen, but if you're willing to meet the movie where it wants to be met, I think it's a fantastic movie.
Yes, and let's go back to where we started. I do want to give a real highlight to Emma Stone here because, as you mentioned, I was thinking that in the history of Hollywood, there's not many actors or actresses who are what I like to call full body actors.
Right.
There's a lot of people who can talk well and their facial expressions are very well done, but there's very few. And I would put Rhea Seehorn, who is the star of Pluribus and was in Better Call Saul, in that category. Mary Tyler Moore, very, very famous. People who can move their entire body to support the part. You know, if you go to like Reddit acting or like early acting school, one of the big questions, what do you do with your hands, right?
Right.
When you act, right? I mean, they a lot of people, when they first start learning acting, think acting is just speaking. But we know from the very great stage performers and of course in the stage, that's one of the reasons that I think Britain produces so many great actors over the centuries, is that they have this regional theater tradition.
Right.
That before you start a TV show, you may have played a small role in Macbeth for 500 calls in small theaters around the Isles, right? So they learn that the audience, there's no direction, right? There's no camera. So like the audience is seeing your feet. They're seeing your hands.
Right.
So you better be, in order to satisfy that audience, you be able to do something with your hands, with your knees. And the whole film, there are definitely times where there's a close-up, but I've noticed there were a lot of full body shots of her where she's reacting or doing something with her whole self. And maybe that's metaphorical for like humanity, like we're being judged as a whole, but I just felt like it was one of the standout performances I've ever seen.
Well, and you mentioned it, that actors, anymore, there's not the expectation that you're going to be the complete package. That's not, it used to be the tradition of you are a multi-talent, and that is still the case in Indian cinema. That still exists in Indian cinema. The expectation of those actors, they can sing and dance and be physical and be funny and be sexy and serious, all in the same breath. And I miss that tradition because it is a shame. Like it is a shame to not really have like what one would consider to be a movie star, like a genuine bona fide movie star. That they don't come around very often. And I think Emma Stone is one of those actresses that has 100%, like, she didn't need to prove it any further, but I am in awe of her acting ability, because to go from Easy A to Bugonia is pretty wild. And, I think there are just some directors out there who get the best out of their actors, and I think Yorgos Lanthimos gets the best out of Emma Stone that anyone has ever gotten. And I'm excited to see how they work together in the future, but this movie, I think, has a lot of interesting roads to go down, kind of, threads to tug at, and I'm really glad that we got an opportunity to talk about it together. So, thank you for pitching this one across the plate, as it were, to use a baseball metaphor, because it's opening day. Everybody, if you don't listen to baseball on the radio or watch it on TV, maybe you should, because it's as American as poisoning the environment, killing the bees, and having aliens blow up the planet. So as for me, you can find me over at the Kulturecast, which is what you're listening to now, or weirdingwaymedia.com, where this show and so many other great shows are posted. If you want to kick a couple dollars my way to help fund the cause of creating movie content that doesn't suck, head on over to my Patreon, patreon.com/Kulturecast, and you can kick a couple dollars my way. $5 gets you bonus episodes. $10 gets you access to the bonus episodes and the James Bond podcast I do once a month with Mike White and Richard Haddam. Though, to be fair, we're recording the last episode of that show this weekend, so it's coming to a close. Dr. Perlmutter, thank you so much for joining me. This was fun. I would not have watched this movie otherwise.
Thank you. Watch the skies.
And as always, we'll catch you on the next episode.